You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
For people who have listened, and we've all heard him in one of his minions' lies and thought it would be a good deal, he won't tell us that doing that is wrong. He'll just say, everybody else is doing it, or that's really pretty, isn't it? Or there's a hook at the end of all of it that he's going to take us down. His goal is to kill everyone. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. He's been that way since Genesis 3. Possibly longer, but Genesis 3 is where it shows up.
Satan is the father of lies. He lived in perfect communion with God before our world began. But despite being able to witness the greatness of God firsthand, he let his desire for power lead to his downfall. There's no coming back from the rebellion he chose. As Pastor Ken examines the book of Revelation in today's message, we'll be reminded of the fate that awaits Satan from his imprisonment during the perfect millennial reign of Christ to his final abolishment to the lake of fire. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Revelation chapter 20 as he begins his message, Satan, Recidivism, and Really Bad Ideas.
We're going to be talking about Satan, recidivism, and really bad ideas. And as we were talking beforehand, recidivism is a big word for saying backsliding. In the world of criminal justice, it means you arrest somebody, they go to jail, they come back out, and they do the same thing all over again. And that's what Satan does. He does the same thing over and over and over. So far, as we've been looking at chapter 20, we've looked at a small picture of what the millennial rule of King Messiah is going to be like. We've gotten the promise of ruling and reigning with him. We know that's going to happen. And if you want to study what the millennium will be like, Revelation only has a small picture of that. You have to go to the Old Testament. Now, there are 3 books I've put in your notes that are good references. The Greatness of the Kingdom is an excellent book. It's about 300 pages, semi-academic in terms of the way it reads. The Coming Kingdom is easy to read. It's not bad. It's about 150 pages. But if you're really crazy, 1,500 pages, 3 volumes, written in 1898, The Theocratic Kingdom of Our Lord Jesus the Christ. It just depends upon how deep you want to go into the topic, okay? Now, speaking about the millennial earth, we get very little here in the book of Revelation. I mean, it's just almost nothing. There's an assumption that we know because we've read the Bible. This is the end of it, right? So that's an assumption. And the problem is most churches today don't do a really good job of teaching the Old Testament, which is one of the things we do here. We teach through the Bible. We teach the Old Testament, the New Testament, all of it. But that's the problem. And we've got to go to the Old Testament. So if you take a look here at David McLeod wrote several great articles in a journal back in the year 2000, and he was talking about the millennial age. He said the millennial age will be a golden age for human beings. It begins with the return of Jesus Christ to defeat his enemies. While he's reigning on earth, Satan is imprisoned in the abyss, actually he's in the pit, with no influence whatsoever on human life. Yay. The redeemed of all ages will be ruling and reigning with Jesus Christ in glorified, resurrected bodies that we cannot possibly send in, okay? And the millennium will be a time where God's moral standards, and this is one of the things that you see in surveys, that people are afraid of being told what to do morally. Well, when Jesus is on the throne, they will be told what to do morally, and if they don't, there'll be a punishment for it. Because he will be ruling with an iron rod. There's the verses for you, Isaiah 32:5, 44, 42:3, and Malachi 4:4. But the Messiah will rule, and everyone will be responsible for their own actions. There will be no more spend, no more getting away, no more lying, no more, he made me do it. No, that doesn't work anymore. There'll be no warfare. So can you imagine all the money spent on warfare being spent on other things? What kinds of things will be developed? There'll be no such thing as environmental crime anymore. People will not have to do that. Beauty will reign in nature. There'll be no physical disease. There'll be no deformity. Every child born every child that will be born perfect. There will be no pregnancy that is ended for any reason whatsoever. They'll all be to term. All the children will live. I mean, it's not a problem. Everything worthwhile in human life is going to be taking place under the reign of Jesus Christ, And of course, he's ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. So that's going to be an issue for some people. Now, something else that we have to understand too, the world will be like it was prior to the flood. There was one giant continent prior to the flood. And at the beginning of Jesus' rule and reign, there's one giant continent again. So you don't have to worry about, I mean, yes, it's a big continent, but if you want to go out and go on the ocean, you can, but it's a long way to go around if you want. John, in his vision here in Revelation, doesn't occupy himself with a lot of the details of the millennial kingdom. He just tells you it's 1,000 years long, and here's what happens. But it's described, again, in the Old Testament. And again, there's verses for you from Dr. Walford. The key is knowing what the Old Testament has in it, which is why we're going to go back to the Old Testament once we're done with Revelation to take a look at that. Right now, we can only ask people to be reconciled with God, but at that point in time, it's not going to be a question. They're either reconciled to God or they're out of here. It's just that simple. So John now takes us to the next step in his eyewitness account in verse 7. When the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth. And if you got one giant continent, there's literally four corners. It's not flat, it's still round, but you can go east, west, north, south. So this is worldwide. That's what he's talking about. Gog and Magog, to gather them together for the war. And in the Greek, it is the war. It's a singular war, okay? The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. And they came up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also. And they'll be tormented day and night forever and ever. I could stop right there. That's not bad. But recall the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ began 75 days after his arrival and the defeat of all the world forces in Jerusalem. Now, Satan has been in the pit, incommunicado, for 1,000 years. Nobody's been talking to him. He hasn't been talking with anybody else. Not one day less or one day more. So when the 1,000 years is over, not the day before, not the day after, when it's over, he's let go. He's let out. So if April 20th is the day, and then that's when he's let out. Now, when the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released. It's a full 1,000-year reign. So you can start 75 days after when it begins and go 1,000 years of 360-day years, and you'll get to it. You'll know exactly the day. And there will be some people who will know. It's their job to know. We'll know because we're going to be in glorified bodies, and we'll know. But we're not told how long it's going to take Satan to do this. Now, he assumed that the population of the planet has reestablished itself. You got 7, 8, 9 billion people on the planet again. And Satan's going to go out and drive them all astray and deceive them. Now, he doesn't do that in a day. That may take months. It may take years. We don't know how long that will take. But it will start on a certain point in time. And you'll see things starting to get worse suddenly, and you'll see people suddenly not communicating, and funds not flowing to Jerusalem, and people not showing up for various celebrations. And then, of course, Jesus will deal with that by saying, you get no rain, you get no rain, you get no rain. So, I mean, that's exactly how he'll deal with it. But we don't know how long it's going to take. But we do know that he's going to do it, and those who are not going to follow what he has to say are those who are loyal to Messiah. And something strange appears to be happening in the Scriptures. You're going to be seeing a group that will be gravitating towards where the kingdom is centered, and you'll see the rest of them staying where they want to be. So if you don't want to be under the rule of Jesus, you've gone and you live at the beach in China, several thousand miles away. But if you love the Lord and you want to see him all the time, you're going to live as close to Jerusalem as you possibly can because you want to see him. And that's what's going to be happening. I think Jerusalem is going to be a huge city. Multi-story tall towers. I mean, it'll be amazing how huge it will be. But at the end of the millennium, he's going to go out and he's going to lead a bunch of people astray, and they're going to be subject to deception. Of course, those who are loyal, just as we are, will be tempted, if they're in human bodies, they'll be tempted, but If they're loyal, they're not going to do it. Loyalty to King Messiah is tested by obedience to him and not taking part in the rebellion that's going to be fomented. So, and in some places it may mean you have to leave. I mean, I don't know, but they'll do whatever they got to do. But stop and think about it. I haven't done the math. I did it for the Book of Genesis study and estimated that after 2,000 years from the beginning of the world to the flood, the population of the planet could be anywhere from 10 billion to 100 billion people. Nobody dies. There's no disease. The only people who die are probably those who are being judged. It says there will be some death. People they'll still be in human bodies. They'll have accidents. But it'll be an interesting environment where, he was killed in this accident, and maybe part of our job will be go to the hospital and there's no doctors. It's just a glorified believer lays hands on him, the person rises from the dead, and they go back to work or whatever. We have no idea what it's going to be like. The imagination can go wild. But there's going to be a lot of unbelievers because remember, these are people who've been born after the tribulation. They have no idea what the world was like before. They don't know. They've heard their parents talk about it, or great-grandparents, or great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. Anyway, they've heard people talk about it. But they don't know what it's like. They've probably seen TV movies or pictures or whatever from that time period, but to them it's just history. Isaiah 65:20 tells us that no longer will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his days. The youth will die at the age of 100. And the one who does not reach the age of 100 will be thought accursed. And most Bible teachers believe that if a person is in rebellion, by the time they're 100, everybody will know, and they're gone. They're just taken at that point. Now, why is Satan let loose? Anybody want to know that? It's not in the Bible. We don't know. Okay? It's not discussed. But that doesn't stop people from guessing. Okay? Or me either. I mean, I like to guess about that too. Why he will be released, Lewis Foster wrote, after his confinement can't be answered. There's no information. It may be that Satan's due one more trial. I don't think so. Okay? I think what's going to be happening is that we're going to be proving out that the heart of man is desperately wicked. Who can know it? And that even without Satan, you still have sin. And with Satan, there's a large number of people who rebel. But the one thing we do know, it is clear to us that we know that the millennium is over the moment Satan's released. Now, Satan, not Satan and his minions, it just says Satan. It's a singular word. It makes us think maybe he's the only one released. Now, his minions could be too. We don't know. Again, the scriptures are silent on that. We do know that once the rebellion has been dealt with, the eternal state is the thing that's up next. So we know, okay, the millennium's over with, Satan's released, and we have this undetermined length of time of rebellion that takes place. Don't know if it's 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. We don't know. God, I love this, God will use the wickedest individual in the world, Satan, and he will use him for what he wants to accomplish. He still answers to God, believe it or not. He gives Satan liberty, he takes it away. Gives him liberty again, and to just basically show that he can bring good out of evil. Thing is that what does Satan do after he's been held for 1,000 years? Does he go straight? No. He is the classic example of someone who should remain incarcerated. And in his case, forever. Because he has had a change in his nature. He's been in prison for 1,000 years, and prison does not reform him. He's still going to be evil, and in the moment that he's released, he's going to go right back out and try and seduce others to listen to his lies and deceive them. He has not departed from the assessment that Jesus made about him when discussing the conduct of the Pharisees in John 8. Now, you remember John 8, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and he's trying to build a bridge with them, and he's explaining to them what they're really like. Of course, they don't like hearing this. But he says in verse 44, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. And here's where we pick up on the nature of Satan. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he's a liar and the father of lies. His nature is simple. It's real simple. He's a serial killer and an incorrigible liar. He doesn't ever tell the truth, ever. So for people who have listened, and we've all heard him or one of his minions lies and thought it would be a good deal, he won't tell us that doing that is wrong. He'll just say, everybody else is doing it, or that's really pretty, isn't it? Or there's a hook at the end of all of it that he's going to take us down. His goal is to kill everyone. That's his goal. That's what he wants to do. He's been that way since Genesis 3, possibly longer, but Genesis 3 is where it shows up. He's not departed from that. He's not reformed. It's not possible because his nature is to deceive. God is love. That's God's nature, okay? Satan is lying. That's his nature, okay? He's the antithesis to what God is in that regard. And because of his actions, even though there's been 1,000 years of perfect conditions, 1,000 years, no death, no disease, none of that, there's going to be those who are still going to have the same problem that man's always had, and that's called a corrupt heart. It's still there. Jeremiah 17:9 is, I think, what this is all about. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And God's proving this, that we need him, we need Jesus to change us. Otherwise, that's what we are. We're just wicked. So as soon as he's released from prison, Satan goes right back to what he has been doing. He served a 1,000-year sentence, and he just goes right back to deceiving the nations. He goes into the four corners of the earth, and that's just basically, he goes around the world, and he spreads deception and lies. He incites those who will listen to believe the lies that the last 1,000 years has been an infringement on their freedom. Okay? Stop and think about that. You aren't truly free. You can be free if you get rid of him. Wait a minute. The people who have given up their freedom, if you want to call it that, and be loyal and obedient to Jesus have more freedom than they've ever seen. You know, I mean, I'll never forget the comment of a gentleman who was a serial murderer. He's a believer. He's in prison. He knows he's going to die in prison, but he says, I'm freer than anybody who's outside because I have Jesus. And that's what Jesus does. But, of course, because of the lies of Satan, everybody's going to know better than King Messiah. 1,000 years of messianic rule, and you got people who think they know better. So Satan is going to continue to operate just as he did back in Genesis 3. That's his modus operandi. That's the way he rolls. That's the way he works. He lies. Remember what he did back in Genesis 3? The woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees, the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you should not eat from it or touch it or you'll die. Now, God did not say don't touch it. He just said don't eat from it. The serpent said to the woman, you surely will not die. That's a lie. God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And she bought it and ate it. And then her husband, stop and think. If she's clothed in light and then he sees her and she's not clothed in light anymore, but he loves her, he willingly went into that. He wasn't deceived. She was. He went that way because he loved her and wasn't going to leave her alone. Stop and think about that. That's tough love. Yeah, it really is. But whatever variant of the lie Satan uses at this point, it's a repeat. You can be like God. You don't need to listen to him. You can be in control of your own environment. You can be your own ruler. And he's going to do the same thing. Now, he spread the lie with the beast and the false prophet. Now he's doing it himself. So in verse 8, looking at it again, will come out to deceive the nations. Okay, he's doing that. In the four corners of the world, everywhere. Gog and Magog. As soon as I say that, you start thinking Ezekiel, Gog and Magog. To gather them together for the war in the Greek. The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. Now, didn't we deal with Gog and Magog back in Ezekiel? I mean, wasn't that the final battle? Aren't we done with it? Yeah, we are. But by using that, That's intentional. Oh, it's like that. That was an invasion of Israel, and God took care of them. This is the same thing. So didn't we take care of it in Ezekiel? Hasn't it already taken place? Yes and yes. This is not that battle, okay? Now, there are some Bible teachers who will say, oh, yeah, it is. No, it's not. Gog and Magog, not God and Magog, I misspelled it. Spell check really works well sometimes. Gog and Magog are used as terms to bring a remembrance of the previous invasion of the land. And it also brings to remembrance what happened to those armies. Now, John borrowed the tradition, the Gog-Magog tradition, and adapted it. In Ezekiel, Gog is a person and Magog is the land which he rules. In Revelation, Gog and Magog are the names of evil nations. We don't know the names of all these nations, but it's every one of them, Gog and Magog. So just like the invasion we're told about in Ezekiel 38 and 39, this will also be an invasion of Israel from the entire world. They'll all come at one time. But it won't be exclusively from the north. Gog and Magog was from the north. This is going to be from the four corners of the world. And again, this doesn't happen overnight. There are no weapons in existence. There are no transport systems for transporting troops, weapon systems, or any of that. None of it exists. Hasn't existed for 1,000 years. The nations which go into rebellion have to create weapons of war. They have to if they're going to do this. And then they got to mobilize their forces and then march on Jerusalem, the capital of the world. This is deja vu because this happened once before, and it did not end well for the participants. What makes them think it's going to end well this time? It's not. But again, it all goes back to the rebel, the one who's leading them astray, by the name of Satan. In Isaiah 14, verses 12 to 17, and then we see it also in Ezekiel 28. It's really interesting how it's Isaiah 14 or Ezekiel 28. That's how you can remember where the things are about Satan. In Isaiah 14, verse 12, how you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. Hallel ben Sahar is what it is in the Hebrew. You've been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. He still thinks that after 1,000 years in prison. Okay? Nevertheless, you'll be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. Those who see you will gaze at you, and they'll ponder over you, saying, is this the man that made the earth tremble? Who shook kingdoms and made the world like a wilderness and overthrew its cities, who did not allow his prisoners to go home? So Isaiah is pretty clear. He says, here's what he thinks he wants. He's not going to get it. It's not. Then you go to Ezekiel 28, verse 12. Son of man, take up a lamentation over the king of Tyre and say to him, thus says the Lord God, you had the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the lapis lazuli, the turquoise, and the emerald. In other words, it's giving all of this, the earmarks that he was a bright being and was the divine being. It's all pictures of that. And the gold, the workmanship of your settings and sockets was in you. So he's a music leader too. And on the day you were created, they were prepared. You were the anointed cherub who covers. His job was to cover the throne of God and lead the singing. And he rebelled from that.
You've been listening to a message from Revelation on the Unsafe Bible. Pastor Ken has been diving deep into this final book of the Bible. If you're into fantasy or sci-fi, you might be naturally drawn toward Revelation. There's all kinds of imagery and strange creatures that are described. But more than any of this, you're reminded of the preeminence of God and that He rules over everything. He rules over all people, nations, and He has more power than the evil that can try to take over the world. What a relief that you can know and trust in this God. Are you confused about anything you heard today? Don't hesitate to contact us. You can get in touch with us by going to theunsafebible.com. Once there, go to the Connect tab and click on Connect Card. Then you can fill out a form for us to get in touch with you. To listen to this message or any others from this series in Revelation, just look under the Media tab at theunsafebible.com. You'll also find additional teachings in other books of the Bible. If you found this ministry to be a blessing to you as you've been listening, you have the opportunity to help support the Unsafe Bible ministry by checking out the Give tab. We're grateful for any donation given to help further the message of the gospel. Any other questions? Feel free to explore the unsafebible.com. For more information about when and where we meet, we're based out of Jupiter, Florida, and would be happy to meet you. Join us again here for another message from the book of Revelation on the Unsafe Bible.